Well, once again, we are back with the Zapata Brand Boxing Podcast, brought to you by Ringside, ringside.com/podcast. Get 40% off selected items at that rate. Steve Kim, someone I've been looking forward to talking with, joins us here at the podcast from the 3 Knockdown Rule podcast with Mario Lopez. Steve, how are you?
I am doing well, George. Glad to join you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I've been following you for years, been trying to get you nailed down at some point, and I finally got it.
No, it's great to be here. I joined you on the roundtable of D-Style Boxing. Eventful times as always. It'll be a lot of fun. Let's talk some boxing.
Well, let's go rewind a little bit. Let's go to Friday. Friday, a big boxing event. Knockout Chaos. Didn't exactly pan out to be Knockout Chaos, other than one fight. But I want to go to the co-main event before we jump into the main event. The co-main event, Big Bang Jian versus Joseph Parker. Kind of not what I anticipated. What were your thoughts there going into the fight?
Well, this was kind of an upset special. I know a lot of the sharp bettors in the minds, they put a little money on Parker given the value that you had. You know, it's really interesting. When I watched that fight, Jian looked really heavy, and he weighed in, I believe, above 290. And I said, and you know, it's funny. I went back after the fight. I went to BoxRec. It turns out that Jian was only about 3.5 to 5 pounds heavier than he was for his last fight. But here's the difference. Joseph Parker is a much more agile, mobile athlete. And I don't know. It's easy to second guess. Hindsight's 20/20. But I wonder if Jian had to do it all over again, if he'd come in closer to, let's say, 275 than he did to 290. I thought the engine was not really good in the second half of the fight. It really wasn't. Scored the early knockdown. You got a knockdown late in the other fight. But then the question becomes, out of those other 10 rounds, how many did he win? And obviously, in the estimation of the judges, he didn't win a lot.
He looked a little bit slow.
Yeah.
And the fact that he was 40, I don't know if you said there was only a couple pounds difference. Maybe he did train as hard, but at 40, your body starts to tend to go the other way.
Yeah, well, look at the variable. Joe Joyce is ponderous. I like Joe. But Joe is one of those guys who moves like a glacier. There's not a lot of speed. There's not a lot of mobility. There's not a lot of twitch. Doesn't accelerate particularly well. He's a guy that kind of grinds you, but he's also very stationary. And the one thing about a guy like Jian, who's been a bit of a locomotive, how do you get out of the way of a locomotive? You just move 6 inches either direction. And as soon as Parker kind of got into the groove, there were a lot of rounds where not much was happening, but all of those rounds tactically were really good for Parker. And again, I know Terry and Tommy Lane very well, good friends of mine, the sons of Mills Lane. I would like to ask them in a frank discussion, was your guy in good enough shape to really defend against a guy like Joseph Parker?
Well, how did you score the fight? Did you get?
No, I thought it was close. I thought it could have gone either way. I mean, George, here's the thing. When you have a 12-round fight and you have 2 knockdowns, that's a 4-point swing right there.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought the first round, I thought Jian actually won that round. So that's 1. But I didn't have a real problem with the decision. I was kind of watching it. I wasn't exactly scoring it round by round, but I figured after that second knockdown, I believe in round 8, I said, this is going to get close here. This is going to get really tough for Parker. But obviously, the judges must have thought 9, 10, 11, 12 went one direction. So I don't really have a big argument with that decision.
Jian appeared to be pretty upset after the result.
Yeah, I mean, but look, maybe he should be upset at himself when you're facing a more athletic fighter who's going to be able to move and offset you, and you're going to have to chase him down a little bit, and he's just not going to be a square target in a straight line. You have to be better. And again, activity matters. Joseph Parker, this was his 5th fight since the beginning of 2023, and he was really quick off the trigger for the most part. He was really sharp. And he's obviously found a really, really good fit with Andy Lee, the former middleweight champion.
Before we go to the main event, if you want to call it that, let's go back to the broadcast itself.
Is it over?
Has
it ended?
They couldn't get it going. I mean, it was almost 7 hours. It was so bad. I mean, I was doing a watch along here live, and I literally had to stop it. I kept saying, guys, I can't. I haven't seen this many breakdowns in every single fight by every. I don't want to hear what Conor Ben's got to say, David Hayes got to say. We all know what they have to do to win. Can these things move any faster?
Well, I wrote in my article for snack.com, K9's Corner. I do a twice weekly schedule. And I just said Jerry Lewis did telethons that didn't last as long as this, although they may have raised more money. It's for a good cause. It was for a good cause. But here's the thing. So I watched it with a group of friends. We went to Tom's Watch, which is right across the street from the crypto.com arena where the Lakers and Kings play. So get this. So the pay-per-view, the main portion starts at 10 a.m. Pacific time. They don't open till 11. Right, so we missed the first, and I really wanted to watch from Israel Madrimov on. I had a great interest in that fight.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know in the first hour and 45 minutes they had one fight?
It's ridiculous.
And I was like, wait a minute. So then I'm thinking, okay, I had a haircut because quite frankly, I was looking like a chia pet, and I needed to get all this painted, right? Like chrome bumper was coming out. And I'm like, okay, I got to get to Montebello, East LA, and there's traffic. So my haircut's at 5, and I'm looking at the Google Maps the whole time because it's telling me how long it's going to take to get there with the traffic. And I'm thinking, okay, I'll get there. I'll get there. Everyone kept saying, Steve, by 2:45, 3 o'clock, the main event will be in the ring. Right around 1:30, I said to myself, there's no way. You just knew it. What they need to do is, number one, and I made a couple of recommendations in my article, especially if you're going to have the fight on a weekday, you got to have no more than 4 fights on the pay-per-view card. You could stream that other stuff, put it on your YouTube, and have it 4 main cards or 4 main bouts on the card.
Mm-hmm.
Then for every prelim, and they do this in the UFC because we've timed it out. I've actually put a stopwatch to this. No more than 10 to 15 minutes in between fights. Keep it moving, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You're right. We don't need a halftime show after every fight. It's not needed. And then maybe for the main event, maybe you go to 20 to 25 minutes, right? But literally, George, they were going above 35, 40 minutes in between some of these other fights. And I'm thinking to myself, how do you retain an audience? And I said to one of my friends texted me who watched the fight, Matt, he's in Atlanta. He said, yeah, nothing like carving out 7 hours of your workday to watch boxing. I'm sure most of America has the same thing. So I texted that to one of the people in boxing that I know. And they said, Steve, I only have 7 hours in a workday to work.
Now, obviously the Saudis don't need the money. I get it. If you're got sponsors and people that you have to put in, I get that. But they got the money. Just move along.
Do. Well, George, here's another thing. I would not have been upset. I would have been impatient, but I would not have been as upset if it's on a Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday is fine.
This is a work day, folks.
Right.
This is a work day. People still work. Now, Fridays are casual, but you still got to go into work. And I don't understand it. See, the reason why they do this, George, and I've written about this, and I've talked to people in the industry, the reason why they stretch out the pay-per-view events, they want more buys. They believe that a longer airtime will eventually attract more buys. I have a theory, though. If you have not bought by the second or third fight, you're just not interested in that card.
No.
Or you're just not a hardcore fan. So if you did not watch by the time Nick Ball is wrestling Ray Vargas to the canvas by the 5th time, you're not buying the card. So I don't get it. And it's almost like you are punishing the hardcore fans that have already given you their money. And you almost feel trapped. I don't need 50 different people, and I like a lot of those people. I know some of them personally. I don't need everyone to bloviate for 15 to 20 minutes at a time. And then just when you think they're getting to another fight, now we switch over to these guys, and you're like, oh, my God.
I couldn't believe it. Steve, I couldn't believe it. Then they went into the interview in the locker room. I'm like, what are we doing? What are we doing? And then you could tell that it was pre-taped. You could tell it was pre-taped because Ngannou didn't have his Jian didn't have his hands taped. He'd already had them taped.
You know, I've been very critical of ESPN, and I've written about this. I actually time it out live discussions during Twitter. If boxing wants to create new fans, I have a question. Number one, never mind that Saturday traditionally in television world is a bad night. When a show gets moved to Saturday, you know what the next step is? Cancellation. That's the truth. Yeah. All right. But Saturday is like the little thing for boxing. Why do so many of our main events, when we want to showcase our best and brightest, why do they happen after midnight on the East Coast? Do you really think you're reaching the biggest audience?
Horrible. When you have when you have an audience on the East Coast now that if you're doing, let's say you're doing a Puerto Rican fighter on the East Coast, that is a huge population in New York.
Yeah.
It is past midnight before the guy gets in.
George, I live in LA, and it's funny. For us, it really doesn't impact us.
I know.
Because even when it's boxing way after dark, it's still only 9:30 to 10:15. Okay. But when I cover a fight at the Garden or on the East Coast, it is amazing what the difference in perspective is that when you get out, it's like 1:30 in the morning, and unless you're in New York, you can't get anything to eat. Everything's closed up, and you feel like, where the hell are we doing? But I think if you want to create, look, I remember when ESPN, not ESPN, I remember when HBO pay-per-view and Golden Boy moved up the Canelo Golovkin rematch an hour earlier. So then I said, okay, maybe, you know what they did though? After a couple early knockouts, they just had an hour-long delay. They didn't start the main event any sooner. I said, guys, you guys don't get it. You look at the Monday Night Football, kickoff is at about 8:15 Eastern time now, right? It actually used to start an hour later in my childhood.
Yeah, I know.
We have got to get these events on days or in a time that is reasonable for everybody, or you're not going to create the next generation of fans.
Do you think they're looking at the replay at all? More people watching it on the replay and saying, not that they wouldn't, if you're not going to buy it, you're not going to buy it. But on the replay, you look at it and it gets more views.
There used to be a time with HBO. If HBO did a pay-per-view or Showtime, the very next Saturday they would show a replay, right? I don't think there's a set schedule for the Zone or Amazon. I don't know how they're going to handle it. So I don't know, but I think a lot of people are just pirating it, or you can get a download copy. I mean, trust me.
Yeah.
The sites are out there. But as someone that wants to watch it live and who has a vested interest, because I do cover this for a living, look, again, I live in LA, but for the people that are living, let's say, east of the Mississippi, I think it's a very, very tough ask.
Yeah, no, I've been struggling with that for years. As I'm getting older, I'm getting tired. I'm dozing off, but I paid $69 for
right. So you want, right, like George, it's like having that really bad bottle of wine that you paid $300 for. No matter how bad it is, you're like, God damn it, we are not leaving. We're drinking this. We paid $300. Honey, drink up. God, drink. You put like a muzzle on her thing. You just like, what? Here's the thing.
It makes no sense. I don't know why they do it. But even if we, sang to the cows come home, they'll never change. They're set in their ways. They're set in their ways. This is what, and I mean, maybe they're more smarter than we are to know this, but as a fan, it's no good for me. And
I almost feel exploited. I don't want to come away from an event thinking, oh God, that's over. I really don't. And here's another thing. I don't think any pay-per-view broadcast should really last more than 4 hours. A football game's 3.5 in the National Football League. And then you get a new game. But in boxing, I go to a lot of fights early when I want to see some undercard fights, some young kids, and I'm there at like 3:30, 4 o'clock. And literally, it's me, the commission, and the janitors and the fighters. There's no one there. And that's the difference. The UFC, when they open their doors, George, at least half the crowd is there by the first bell.
That's what I mean.
Different culture. It really is.
They have to model that after the guy who is doing so well. Dana White does this better than anyone. He puts on a show better than anyone. But the other thing that I was thinking while you were saying that is, do you think that it's for concessions? Because they're lower. The baseball games are starting to shorten. Baseball games, which was the worst. Baseball games are the absolute worst. But now they're shortening up. And if you get a stinker boxing match, it could be bad. Yeah. But even they're shortening it up. They're saying, hey, let's get this moving. The only thing I thought of was possibly concessions.
Yeah, but you know what, though? Here's the funny thing. The concessions are generally owned by the venue. The network or the promoter, they don't really cut the deal in. They're not getting a piece of every Bud Light or Coors Light that is sold. They're really not. Now, do I believe that you need some delays to allow people to go to the restroom, get concessions, settle back in? Yes. But again, we are talking about degrees here. We don't need 30 minutes. Because if you took, let's say every delay was 30 to 35 minutes and you made those delays 15 minutes, George, on a 6-7 fight card, that's an hour and 15 at least. That makes a difference.
No, it does. We struggle with that. We put on amateur shows here. You get 15, 16 fights. You're like, right, let's get it moving. We got to move. I mean, the commissioner, USA Boxing's like, you guys, we're going to be here till 2 o'clock. Let's move it. They even tried to bump it up a little bit, but which didn't go over well. But you brought up a point about the Vargas fight. What was your opinion? I have an opinion on that. What was with the ref?
I don't know. Look, I've
Did
called
you
Ray
think
Vargas
did you
the
think ball won?
boringest. I
Did you
thought
think
ball won, but I'm very biased because I'm probably I've called Ray Vargas the boringest Mexican champion in the history of boxing. I just cannot watch him. He's just agony. I remember watching him when he was at Golden Boy. That was a fight. I said, you know what? We don't even need a break. I'm going to take a piss and buy a beer during his fights, and I'll come back in a half hour. I'll be on. Just not a fan of his. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But I thought Nick Ball, with the 2 scored knockdowns, the first one was kind of shady.
Yeah.
I thought he did enough. I thought he did enough to take the title. I thought he nicked it, but it was close. Both guys probably won 5 to 7 rounds, depending on your interpretation. My assumption is with a draw, I don't know if there was a rematch clause. I'm not so sure if Nick was necessarily a mandatory, but Ray Vargas, to me, is an agony fighter. He really is, George. So I can't necessarily give an unbiased opinion about it.
Steve, honestly, I was dozing off.
Oh,
I was just dozing off. And the only thing that kept me exciting was he was throwing them around. Every time I said, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, that's the only thing that kept me up. I was literally, it was so sloppy and just a mess.
I mean, think about the featherweight division. You have a very tall, angular Rafa Espinoza put on a great fight against Robesi Ramirez. Raymond Ford, dramatic victory against Komatov a couple of weeks ago. And then you got young kids like Bruce Shushu, Carrington, and you have Inoue, who sooner or later is going to be up there. And the other champion whose name escapes me right now, he's a pretty good fighter. And then you got Vargas. I thought we were this close to getting rid of Vargas, and we're stuck with the guy. Jeez.
Now we're stuck.
We're still stuck with him.
Well, but we got to the main event.
Yeah.
And after these 7 hours of agony, we get to the main event. Now, initially going in, and I said this on the roundtable on D-Style Boxing, I leaned towards Francis Ngannou.
What?
I did.
Wow.
I will tell you why. I think people jumped on the Joshua bandwagon for the last fight with Wallen. There was something mentally. I'm very big on your mental stability in boxing.
Right.
I didn't feel he had the mental capacity to handle someone who was going to, I thought, come in and just roughshod him. About 30 seconds in, I saw him trying to backhand parry I said, this guy's in trouble, big trouble. And boy, was it big trouble for him.
Yeah. When he went southpaw, he just invited that long right hand. And I'm like, bro, you're not Terrence Crawford.
No.
Okay.
And also, give Ben Davidson credit. If you watch the when they're warming up, Joshua was leaning in with the jab and really stretching that right hand, straight right hand in, not knowing, I don't think, he was going to go southpaw to start. And once he hit the ground, I was on the ppv.com chat with Jim Lampley and Kevin Iole. I said, this fight is over.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not going to harangue you too much about picking Ngannou because I know D-Style is going to do that for everyone. But the element of surprise was gone here. And largely, the perception that Ngannou was a capable boxing heavyweight was largely because of Tyson Fury. But without the element of surprise and the fact that Anthony Joshua is a fighter, again, activity matters. He's 4-0 now in the last 342 days. He's getting a lot of developmental rounds that he should have gotten about 6 years ago, instead of becoming a twice-a-year fighter so early into his run. But look, he's a big, strong guy, and he's a straighter, better puncher than Fury. Look, I don't necessarily go by the triangle theory because I don't know if this necessarily means that Anthony Joshua now handles Tyson Fury. I don't think it works that way. But, Joshua can still punch. He really can. And once Ngannou tried to get fancy instead of being rugged and tough, you're right. He played right into his hands because that's why they call it the sweet science. I don't think Ngannou will ever learn some of the real nuances of the sport. He just really started too late. And once he got nailed with the right hand the first time, the fight was over. And by the way, George, I actually missed the fight because I had to leave right after.
Are you kidding?
I did, because I had a haircut to get to, and my guy's only there on Fridays. And I'm like, oh, God, okay. So halfway into my ride to Montebello, I'm on like the 10 freeway transferring over to the 60 or something like that, or to the 10. And I just got alerts all over. The fight's over. And I said, geez, I could have waited. I mean, because again, I didn't know if they were going to take another 45 minutes to get the fight on, George.
Good point. That's a good point. That's a good point. I just knew he had those really weird looking hooks that looked like amateurish. One of the first punches, I always tell my amateurs, fake that jab to the body and come up top, because all amateurs try to put their hands down because they're not used to it. First couple amateur fights, you're not used to it. And right over the top right hand, you always do it.
Yeah, and with the way Anthony changed levels and went down with the jab,
Tremendous.
And really set up the feints. And you could, again, Ngannou's inexperience in boxing, he really was impacted by the feints. He really was, more than an average professional boxer that's done this for many more years. And then the right hands came over the top, and he layered his attack really well. So, I mean, look, it is what it is. I don't know if he really saved the honor of boxing. I think Jim Lampley last week on our show called it a proxy war between Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. If it was indeed a proxy war, the big loser was not Ngannou, because he wasn't supposed to win and he got paid a lot of money. The big loser this past weekend was Tyson Fury.
Tyson Fury. Yeah, it was. What I kind of made a comparison with Francis Ngannou, similar to baseball. First year, rookie year, big batting averages, big home runs, big RBIs, and then the next year they figure him out. Yeah. Curveball, slider, he's down in the minors, career over. So I think kind of like that, you kind of, all right, we got this guy, what he is.
Yeah, I mean, also Tyson Fury is such an up and down. I never have understood the people that say Tyson Fury is an all-time great heavyweight. I've said, first of all, the guy's had one of the worst heavyweight runs ever, and they had to gin up this whole linear title. I'm sorry. Once you stay out of the ring for 2.5 years after winning the title, you're no longer my champion. I don't care about the lineage. And then when you have to like prop up guys that you fought coming back, like Sefer Safari, and they say, well, it's the linear title. I'm like, come on. And this is how much we overrated the victories over Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder himself is not a top 25 all-time heavyweight. Very flawed, very exciting, very explosive, but an incomplete fighter. But because it was a big event, suddenly we thought, okay, the wins over Wilder elevate Fury to top all-time status. And I'm like, no, because a mark of an all-time fighter, in my view, George, is consistency of performance. And when you are taking years off, and there are heavyweights that you have not fought, and you're unreliable as he is, I don't know about you, George, I just cannot give a guy like that all that much credit.
No, I can't either. I do think he's a good fighter. Probably one of the a top 15 maybe heavyweights.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's a tough matchup. He's 6'9". He's now over 275. He's got rare athleticism for that size and a good boxing IQ. But I'm not going to lie to you. I say the Ngannou fight with him kind of made me laugh. It didn't anger me. I thought it was really funny because I had asked people like Jim Lampley and Larry Merchant. I say, so you still think he would have competed with all-time great heavyweights? Because I have a feeling that the heavyweights that we'd list in the top 10, I don't think they would have struggled with Ngannou under any circumstance.
Well,
maybe age, maybe when they're older. But supposedly Fury is still in his prime. It's a little bit different.
He's abused his body a lot.
He has, though. But again, that's part of being a pro. That is being part of a pro.
I think that's going to really, in the next year or two, that's gonna rear its ugly head in the next couple of years, year or two. So on 2 points on that, where does AJ go, and where does Ngannou go?
Well, AJ has got a lot of options. He's still the biggest moneymaker in the division and therefore boxing, right? I don't know. I know there's a rematch clause for Fury Usyk should that happen May 18th. I'm hearing that they could fudge that. There's ways you can adjust it. So you have a I don't say it's a conundrum. You have options. You wait to see what happens and see if you could face the winner of that if it is Fury, because he's already lost to Usyk twice. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. Based on the mojo that he has back, if you were to say, Steve, would you want to see Anthony Joshua, this particular version, get one more crack at Usyk? You know what? I would not be opposed. We have to go back to the rematch. Going into that 10th round, I thought it was 5-4 Usyk, and Joshua had a big night. That was not a blowout. No matter what anyone wants to remember, whatever perceptions you have of that fight. But should Fury win, and I'm not convinced he will, Fury Joshua, no matter where it's held, becomes the most lucrative bout in boxing. So I think a lot of what Anthony Joshua decides will be predicated on what happens, if it happens, between Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk.
Now, let me go real quick before I get to Francis. What if, because Joshua wants to stay busy, what if he took Phil Hrgovic instead? I know it's a dangerous fight. It's a dangerous fight.
I like it. Look, I think fighters should fight, and I think
I believe so too.
It's a respectable fight. Hrgovic is up in the ratings. I believe he's the mandatory for Usyk.
Mm-hmm.
But let's face it, Anthony Joshua probably brings you more money than any Usyk fight, whether there's a title on the line. And it would be a fight. Look, I don't want to hear what's risky. George, it's boxing. It should be risky. I am so sick of the risk aversion that exists in the game today, where we try to protect these fighters like Fabergé eggs. Guess what? If you do not have fights where there's a consistent risk, where there's actually a threat of both men winning, this sport's not going anywhere. This is how we got here in the first place. I don't want to hear of another fighter taking a step-aside fee and then 2 years later crying that their career's not going anywhere. Hey, buddy, that step-aside fee came at a cost, okay? Right. Nothing in life is free. There's a lesson there.
Oh yeah, they got at some point take a chance. At some point, yeah. Back when I was coming up in the '90s, whenever they fought, everybody fought. You had those big Don King cards with 3-4 title fights on top of the card. Francis, where does he go?
I'm not sure. Does he even want to box anymore? I mean, he probably made
for $20 million
enough money for his ancestors down the line, right? Yeah. So that's generational money that he was never going to make in the UFC or anywhere in the MMA. He may not want to do this anymore. Now, I mean, I don't want to say it was an embarrassing loss, but that was devastating. Those images became a meme very quickly. Trust me. By the time I was getting my hair cut, they were all out there, and I'm like, okay, wow, I failed. Sweet tweeting all of them, by the way. I was like, okay. So, he got folded up like a poker table. Yeah, I was like, you public. Boy, you're good, though. So I don't know what he really wants. Because here's the thing, George, the mind of a business owner or a worker. Once you make a certain amount of money, it's hard to go back psychologically to any other money. I mean, if you're in a certain tax bracket, you live a certain lifestyle, you don't ever want to really go back.
Right.
So let's say he goes back into the octagon. Him and Dana White patch things up. Is he really willing to go back there for a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a sliver of the money? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, he does have a contract with PFL. I don't think he will honor that. I think, like you said, this might be the end.
Yeah.
And not that, look, give the guy credit. I think there's only one person from boxing who went from boxing to MMA to ever win. And that was Ray Mercer. It doesn't bode well the other way. It just never does.
No, it doesn't. And I've never asked Wayne Gretzky to beat Michael Jordan in a game of one-on-one, but I know Michael Jordan can't ice skate either. Okay. But here's the thing. For Francis Ngannou to have fought well enough to get a second multi-million-dollar payday, that's a success. He's the most highly touted, lucrative 0-2 fighter in the history of boxing. You can argue with me all you want. I think it's a success story.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, definitely. Wow. That was definitely an exciting ending to that card. So at least that got through with some positive stuff. Next topic I want to talk about quickly was 2 fights that are coming up, supposed fights. Obviously, Tyson versus Paul. Now, I'd spoken to the State Athletic Commission in Texas. That is yet to be either an event, a fight, or an exhibition. Mike Tyson has not applied for the license, and the only thing they have is the date set aside. That being said, what do you expect about this?
I'd like to know the ground rules. Is it an exhibition? What are the glove sizes? What is their headgear going to be used? Will it be a real fight? And will Mike Tyson be handcuffed? Will he be shackled in any way in terms of letting his hands go? You know what? If he's not, I'm actually interested. But if there's this gentleman's agreement, like, hey, Mike, let's pull our punches. Let's not hit me above the waist. And I don't want to see that then. I don't really want to Jake Paul, Mike Tyson, and chill. I don't. But if it's actually a fight where Jake has enough guts to go in there with that old lion, I'm curious. I can't lie. But again, we have to know the ground rules. What's funny is this announcement went out on, I think, Thursday. One of the first things I do when I wake up, I check my phone. And when I'm seeing these tweets about the fight, I started going into the profiles of some of these bigger writers just to make sure these weren't parody accounts. For about 5 minutes, I was like, okay, this is a real guy. It's, Coppinger, Mark Raimondi, all these guys that I trust.
Mhm.
And it was funny because Mario on our last show on 3 Knockdown Rule asked Steve, where does Jake Paul go? Are they running out of guys? I said, yeah, I think they have. And then he pulls this out of his hat. I will give him credit. But again, George, what are the rules of engagement? That's the question.
I think with Netflix being involved, it will be what they're going to call an event.
Okay, it's an event.
I think it'll be an event. It won't be called an exhibition, and it will not be called a boxing combat sport competition, because they will be under the rules of the Texas State Athletic Commission, whether it is an exhibition or combat sports event. An event, quote unquote, is not going to be overseen by the athletic commission.
Well, then.
But I will say this, Steve. Steve, I'm going to be honest with you. And I get into this argument with my kids just this morning. 58 is 58.
It is. George, I remember watching. We were in Vegas. It was me, Doug Fisher, during our Max Boxing days. And they gave members of the media tickets to go watch at some theater in Las Vegas at one of the casinos. They were showing the Danny Williams Mike Tyson fight.
Mhm.
And he got knocked out. It was in Louisville. And I remember thinking, wow. And then a year later, he lost to Kevin McBride. I actually interviewed Kevin McBride when I was out at ESPN. And it was like the saddest thing to see one of the most ferocious heavyweights be reduced to this. George, that was over 20 years ago. And now we're trotting him back. See, look, the Tyson Jones thing that took place on Triller, I get it. 2 older guys, let them make some money. And keep this in mind, that was during the pandemic. There weren't a lot of sports options. Things were shut down. You had to do limited amount of events. But I'm a traditionalist, George. I think me and you are right around the same age. I grew up when there was real fights. Stuff like this has always kind of happened, but it was so rare. And I was asked this on a Las Vegas radio show on Monday. Is this stuff here to stay, George, whether we like it or not?
Yeah, but even when it like you get like the Manute Bowl versus somebody else, it was legit. If you got knocked out, Todd Bridges, you
Celebrity Boxing on Fox, that was good.
You would get knocked out. I fought, not me. One of my fighters fought on a Damon Feldman Celebrity Boxing show years ago. You're talking like 2000 when his brother had it. Not the guy who's doing it now. It's his brother, Damon.
Dave Feldman, yeah.
Dave has it now, but Damon is his brother. He used to do them all the time in Delaware, but it was like.
Did the Jose Canseco Vicek Hema fight?
Him.
Jose tried to stick in his brother Ozzy.
Yes, that was hysterical. Damon Feldman's a great guy. He puts all these fights together, but they were legit. If you couldn't, and Vicek Hema, he could fight.
No, he could fight. He used to hit like after touchdowns. He would hit the goalpost, and I was like, that guy must have fought.
Guy can fight. 100%. So as soon as it was matched, I said that's a bad matchup for him. I hope Canseco knows this guy can fight. But what I'm saying is they were legit. If you got knocked out, you got knocked out.
I mean, and that's fair. But if it's just going to be, hey, we're just going to play grab ass here.
Stupid. It's stupid.
Now, here's the thing. I believe this comes with your Netflix subscription.
That's what I was going to say.
So then I'm like, maybe I'm taking this too seriously.
That's what I was going to say. Obviously, this is going to be a loss leader for them. They're hoping maybe to get subscriptions, but if it comes with a subscription, it's kind of just a loss leader, because there's no way, if Tyson's getting 20 million, which they say they are, and Jake Paul, obviously he's going to make just about the same. You ain't generating $40 million for this.
If I am a young boxer that has any bit of talent and I have an opportunity to be on that undercard, if I'm a manager, I dial up and go, hey, we'd like to be on that card. You're going to get great exposure.
Absolutely.
You really are.
Smart move. So the other fight that is being bandied around is a fight which is, you can hear me? You good?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Another one that's being bandied around that is, in my opinion, way more dangerous than this one is Manny Pacquiao, Conor Benn. Now, that is dangerous because I don't think 23-0 Conor Benn is going to take this lightly, and neither is Manny Pacquiao, and that's a bad recipe for Manny Pacquiao at 44.
George, one of my pet lines, and I wrote this years ago when I was at Max Boxing, I said, boxing doesn't give out gold watches for retirement. They give out beatings.
Yep.
And look, I get it. Yordenis Ugas was a late replacement for Errol Spence. But that was about 3 years ago, right? That was August of 2021. And Manny just didn't have the juice. He didn't have that gear anymore. Father Time had caught up to him, got clearly outpointed by a really difficult, solid boxer.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't boxed in 3 years. And I'm not going to lie to you. I tweeted out this last week. When Manny retired, I thought, you know what? You went out, gave a good effort against a world-class fighter. You lost. You can go out on your feet. Now you have better, bigger things to do, like running the Philippines. And for him to come back, it's disappointing. I'm not going to lie to you. Someone that covered Manny's career very closely from the beginning, I had access that no one else did about 20 years ago at Wildcard, okay? To see what it's become, where it's just another, I don't say sad story, but that familiar tale of a guy that has to come back. And I'm thinking to myself, what about your political career? What about all the other aspirations you have? Is it just, have you forgotten about it? I don't know. I don't want to be overly cynical about it. And you're right. When you said age is age, what has changed for the better in 3 years physically with Manny Pacquiao?
It would be actually the reverse. I'm actually getting back in the ring in April, and I'm 48. So I realized when you're getting in there, the first couple times sparring, it's like, this ain't the same.
Oh, it's of course not. The same. George, I work out differently. Like I do a boxing workout. I haven't sparred in years, but I do less at all my workouts. I don't lift free weights anymore. I do the resistance bands and body work. I do, honestly, because quite frankly, I don't need rotator cuff surgery at my age. I mean, when I went to the Teofimo Lopez fight last month, I went to the fitness center and there was a free weights there in that area. I said, I'll just do free weights. I did a chest workout. George, I felt like I got hit by a truck. That soreness did not go away for about a week. And I just, you know what? Let me just stick with the resistance bands and the straps and the body weight. Because my strength was still good, but the recovery was just different. It really was. And I said, you know what? I'm good with, I don't even need to go to LA Fitness anymore. Right. And now you're asking guys to get hit. And Conor Benn, no matter what we say, I would hope that there's drug testing because we all know what's surrounding Conor Benn. And so I don't know what type of drug testing they're going to use in Saudi Arabia. But in my view, the perfect way for Manny to have finished this career out would have been that victory over Keith Thurman in 2019. But unfortunately, though, George, in this sport, outside of guys like Rocky Marciano, maybe, most everyone else ends their careers a fight or two too late rather than a fight or two early.
Now, is your impression that there is a financial issue here?
Yes, I believe so.
Do you really?
Yes, because of taxes and IRS and the fact that Manny, I don't want to say he squandered his money because it's been a lot of good causes. He's done a lot of goodwill with his money. But yes, I'm being told that there's a financial issue.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I mean, look, his broke is different than our broke. We don't need to throw him a GoFundMe in Manila. That's not what I'm saying. Right. But is there a fight? Why do you think fighters fight? Unless you're Ray Leonard, most fighters fight because you need a little bit of money. Money's always a factor.
I thought his political thing would take care of him.
Yeah, but I think he tried to fight.
Reason in the United States, you go in making $100,000, you leave a multimillionaire.
Well, that's we have insider tips on that point, but I think over there it's very corrupted, and I think he found out the reality of just how far he can go with this. But wow, I had always hoped, like with Gennady Golovkin, how quiet he has been since his last fight, and he's been slowly stripped away of his remaining middleweight title belts. If he never fights again, I think that's a great thing. The way Marvin Hagler never, as bitter as he was after the Ray Leonard fight, for him to just say, you know what, I've got the rest of my life to do what I'm going to do, and he got to it. We need more of that. I think it's just so sad. I don't know. I didn't say at the beginning of this year, George, God, I really hope Manny makes a comeback. I never said that to myself.
Well, maybe if he came back with someone, I would say in the same situation, maybe. Not a 23-year-old, 23-year-old fighter who's 27-year-old. It's just not a recipe.
I get it. But here's the thing, even if he fought, let's say Marquez in an exhibition, right? The old nemesis. You're still hitting an older man. You're still losing brain cells. There's still a price to pay. I've always thought fighters today, I wish they would fight more often in the beginning and quit sooner. There used to be a time when you were 32, 33, you were really considered old.
You were done.
You were done. And Ray Mancini once said, his dad said, hey, son, once you're around 28 to 30, start thinking about hanging them up. That was the mindset. These guys would pack in a lot more fights. I hate when people say, well, Steve, you always talk about fighters staying active. Haven't you seen the way this guy is, this guy? Yeah. And I go, yeah, they all boxed about 10 years too long. You're making the wrong argument here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Mancini was very smart with his money. I know that
he was, and he never quite got over the Dooku Kim situation. I'm very close with Ray. I did shows with Ray.
I just had Ray on.
Yeah, Ray's a great guy, but Ray also said, Steve, at 27, I had options, and also my hunger for the sport had left me. But even he came back a couple times, and he only regretted one fight. I think it was the Hagen fight. He looked terrible, but he fought Camacho after he was done. But look, Robert Garcia, I believe, had his last fight at age 28. And he's one of the rare guys who said, that's it, I'm done. And he got into training with his father, and now he runs a dynasty up there in Riverside, doing a great job. But Robert said, Steve, he'll tell me, he said, Steve, I was lucky. Once I was done, I actually stayed done. We need more of that. And
he also invested his money, real estate. The very smart people, that whole group there.
Yeah.
It's like a synergy between them. And that's good. That's the rare case. You are 100% right. It is very rare. Father Time is undefeated, and usually the financial mistakes come with that.
It is. And I like to remember fighters at their peak. When I see some of these older fights taking place, it's sad. These guys should not be in there. I don't know why the commissions allow it. I think Texas, they have to be mulling over exactly what are we licensing. It'll be good economically for the state. The state commissions need events because that's what funds them, right? But let's say someone actually really gets hurt. Mm-hmm. Think about the intrinsic damage you're going to do to the sport if something tragic happens.
Yeah, that's why I think they believe they'll call it an event and not an exhibition. Let's switch gears for the final moment here. Something we talked about a couple Thursdays ago on D-Style Boxing. Canelo finally makes his decision for Jaime Munguia. The big debate was whether PBC had $35 million to pay or did not, and who would he choose? And my stance the whole time about this whole thing was PBC. If I was PBC, I wouldn't pay him. And now the point was, would they ever go back into business with them again? Because you go. But if I was to pay a guy, one of my employees here, for example, I have a business here. If I were to say, hey, I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars and you're going to give me way less than I'm getting back in return, I'm out. I'm not doing that.
Not for Charlo. I don't blame them. They have every right to say, even though they breached it, I don't understand why they agreed to both Charlos and a welterweight. That was a badly constructed deal. I don't understand why Canelo just doesn't go fight by fight the way Ray Leonard did.
It makes the thing is this. PBC, I think they made a smart move. Let him go. But Canelo then kind of backed himself into a corner, gets into an argument with anyone else, gets into an argument with Eddie Hearn. They're done. Why, PBC has the ball in their court. I would say, no, we're not. That's why I think it came down to Munguia.
The Munguia fight, I think, is a good one. Look, it's not Benavidez. I don't know if he's ever going to fight Benavidez, but the Munguia fight, Munguia will go out with his boots on. It'll be a fun fight. It will not be like Charlo, who was there for the payday, did not give an ounce of effort. I thought that was shameful what he did last September, okay? So with that being said, again, certain fights are worth a certain amount of money, which is why I think that these multi-year deals, they could really lock in networks and promoters into bad deals where they're going to bleed money. The Munguia fight will do well. My understanding is, George, and Amazon Prime is not doing a lot for this March 30th event. They're really not. My understanding is, I was told this by a very good source, that'll be like the hard launch of that boxing series. They're going to throw a lot of marketing money and dollars and advertising into that show. March 30th is going to happen, but May 4th will really be a test case of how much does the Amazon marketing and machine work on a pay-per-view. That's what I'm told, that they're going to treat that like a Super Bowl. Okay. So I think that fight's going to do well. And look, from their standpoint, Al Heyman and PBC may have said, oh yeah, with the Charlo, that's a dud. We're not paying you the $35 million. For Munguia, we'll pay you that $35 40 mil, whatever it is. And my understanding, it's a one-fight deal.
Correct.
That's the way it should be.
Mhm.
Because when I go into an agreement, I want both sides to say, okay, we got something out of it. It's beneficial to both of us, and we could start anew after this one. But when you start, and I've seen this before, George, when fighters get locked into 8-fight deals with this much money, that deal can become an albatross for everybody involved. It can create a situation where you can't fight certain fighters. The network is not getting great ratings, and the promoter just keeps bleeding money all the time. Canelo is that rare fighter, like a Ray Leonard. He should go fight by fight and make the best deal and best fight available to him every single time.
And that's why I thought it was a smart business deal for PBC to say, "Hey, you go ahead and go," because you don't want to get your company bankrupt by paying this guy. And then, I mean, Charlo, I don't think Charlo would do $200,000. I really
There
wouldn't.
is such a toxic
Holy cow.
Element to the Charlo name.
At
Because
this point,
the
yes.
way Jermel performed on September probably stained Jermel. Honestly.
A little bit. Yeah. Yeah. You don't want anything of that.
And I didn't understand this. Why was Spence in that deal? I'm like, he's a welterweight. I've never think about this. You're going into a 3-fight deal with a super middleweight, the undisputed champion in that division. So you can make a 3-fight deal. And think about this. So the 3-fight deal consists of an inactive junior middleweight, an inactive middleweight, and then a welterweight.
Right.
I did not understand. I know it's Canelo, but you have to make some money at this deal. It's not just enough to have a lost leader time after time.
I think they anticipated Spence to beat Crawford pretty easily, and I think they underestimated that.
Well, the best laid plans of mice and men, as they say.
Yeah, and it certainly backfired a little bit.
Yeah,
but I still think, in my opinion, PBC actually came out on top here.
No, here they did a good job of salvaging this thing. Now they're going to have to make this work. What if Munguia wins?
Oh,
now Zanfer and Golden Boy have like the hottest guy. And I spoke to someone at Golden Boy. They said, Steve, look, we knew a lot of things were going on. At the end of the day, we have to let our fighters fight, make their money, and come back a hero. Come back a hero. You never know what could happen. Look, Munguia is going to throw punches. He's going to be active. Maybe, and you look, age is age, right? Canelo is nearing 65 fights. You never know, like the end of Blues Brothers, when Jake and Elwood finally got to Chicago to pay the assessor's fine, and the car just like breaks up. It had no more miles in it. It was just over. It's the end of the road. You never know when it could be.
Right, and boy, would that be a total disaster for PBC? Well,
no. What if they make a lot of money though? I mean, my point. Look, it's a 1-fight deal. And look, they didn't really create Canelo. They've had him here and there. I just think, to me, it'd be a boon for the Zone, Zanfer, and Golden Boy.
Yeah.
But, I don't believe that there's ever a boxing savior. I don't think one fighter or one event can ever save a company or a network. You have to be consistent. You have to have a group of fighters. You have to have a group of fights that are going to consistently give you action and really be able to keep the audience captivated. I mean, the bigger issue for Amazon and PBC is I want to see what the rest of the schedule is. Like, what is coming on after May 4th? When is Tank Davis? Certainly one of the game's biggest draws. When's he going to fight? Is David Benavidez really going to fight Alexander Gvozdyk on pay-per-view? I think that's a very tough ask of the American public. But roll it out there, because you have fighters you have to develop. And that's what Top Rank probably does as well as anybody, is beyond the main event below them. They always have a young kid like a Keyshawn Davis or an Abdullah Mason or a Bruce Carrington waiting in the wings. It's like a factory with them.
The boxing product doesn't invest in their own like UFC does. They invest in their own product to make it better. You got to go back to the days where you had the HBO little vignettes before, and makes you involved.
The problem is it's too divided, and the profit margins are actually very low in boxing for the promoters, that they really don't have money to do that or an interest. It's basically every man for themselves. I actually wish there was a situation where if there's a mandatory situation or a challenger, that you go to purse bids or you work out a deal, and whatever network is willing to put out the most amount of money gets the fight. And there's none of this, well, you can't go to this side of the street or but the sanctioning bodies themselves don't call the mandatories. They're in cahoots with these guys a lot of times. And then that's a shame. Like William Zepeda's fighting this Saturday. I love Calderon. He's one of my favorite fighters. He comes out punching from the opening bell. This is a double eliminator, George, for the WBA and IBF. Right. He's actually number one in the sanctioning bodies, where the champions are Shakur and Tank. Well, again, now we start getting into the politics. If Cameron should overcome a tricky Maxie Hughes, he's number one in both. Okay, now you have a situation where Tank Davis has said, well, I'm with PBC. All right, now who's going to get the fight? Well, Tank's the bigger draw, so will Golden Boy be willing to tell the zone, hey, I know all that money you spent on Cameron, we're going to have to send him to the zone. And then you have Shakur Stevenson, who's a bigger name fighter who's made more money. If you want to fight Stevenson, you have to do it on ESPN. And so then the zone's going to say, well, wait a minute. We've done this kid's last 7 fights and we put in $8 million. What are we getting out of it? See, that's where the platform protection and the network exclusivity, they're actually just as bad as the sanctioning bodies, George, that people do not realize. I've written about it for years. This whole thing, it's not just one entity's fault about the breakdown of boxing. It's not just the fighters. It's not just the promoters. It's not just the sanctioning bodies or the networks. It's everybody. They all have a hand in this.
Well, I mean, to think that there would be something to come positive out of this, at least they're not going to go with the same business model that the Saudis did on Friday. That was,
well, the Saudis are going to play a role. Keep this in mind, George. They're going to do about 6 shows a year, 6 big shows, and basically selected by Turkey, Al-Sheikh. And they're going to be able to provide a financial bridge for certain fights that otherwise could not be made in America, namely like Bivol Beterbiev. So if they're only going to do 6 shows a year, that they are not taking over boxing. No one's going to take over boxing. It's too big. It's too global. But if every year they can make sure a Beterbiev Bivol happens and create some other good fights in between that, they could really provide a great aid to boxing because they'll keep the business moving. But look, it's only 6 fights a year. If boxing is going to be taken over by any entity that's not going to even be willing to do 10 fights a year, it does not say a lot about the business.
No, it certainly doesn't. But Steve, it has actually been an honor. I've been looking forward to this for a very long time. How can my audience get a hold of you, and where can they find you?
Well, actually, in about an hour, I'm going to be out there at the Universal with Mario Lopez. We do the 3 knockdown rule. The number 3 knockdown rule. It's on YouTube and all the podcast platforms. We have a lot to talk about. Also, I'm on Fearless with Jason Whitlock on the Blaze Network.
I love it.
You can Google that. It's on. Also, Jason Whitlock has his own YouTube channel. This is the background banner for it right now. Also, if you want to get pissed off as I inundate your timelines, I'm on Twitter, Steve Kim 323, and also Steve Orale Kim on Instagram. And those are all the shows that I do.
They're all great shows, Steve. Your writing has been tremendous for years. I've followed you, believe me.
Oh, thank you.
All your days. And I'm not saying you're old. I mean, I'm just.
I am old though.
I've been following you, and I just, and when you were on D-Style Box, I said, that's Steve Kim. Oh my God, I get to talk to Steve Kim, and he even answered my question. I really appreciate your time, Steve. Again, follow Steve everywhere he is. Also hangs out with Mario Lopez on YouTube, Jason Whitlock on YouTube. This guy's done it all in boxing. Steve, thanks for coming on the program.
George, I appreciate your time and your audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks for watching the Zapata Brand Podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast and listen where all podcasts are available.